Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you're listening. Welcome back to AI and the Future of Work. Thanks again for making this one of the most downloaded podcasts about the future of work. If you enjoy what we do, please like, comment, and share in your favorite podcast app, and we'll keep sharing great conversations like the one we have today. I'm your host, Dan Turchin, advisor at Insight Finder, the system of intelligence for IT operations, and CEO of PeopleRain, the AI platform for IT and HR employee service. First up, in our new AI Fact of the Week segment, according to the O'Reilly Enterprise AI Survey published a few months back in March, 69% of respondents said they're either using AI-based applications in production or currently evaluating at least one AI application. Notably, that's about the same as the results from the 2021 study that O'Reilly conducted. Now, shifting to this week's conversation, the CIO's job is thankless. You've heard me talk about that theme in the past. When things are going well, it's crickets. You don't hear anything. But when they're not, your head's on the chopping block. It's no surprise that CIOs are notorious for having the shortest tenure of all execs in the C-suite. The best CIOs have learned that partnering with the business and delivering great employee experiences is the way to avoid that, what I'll call the CIO death spiral. Delivering great experiences requires listening to employees. The best CIOs, many of whom have been on this show, and you've heard from them in the past, are less technology traffic cops and more partners looking to find solutions to business problems that just happen to involve technology. Now, today's guest, Ben Brennan, is an expert in what it means to deliver great employee experiences with technology. We met years back when he was an IT leader at Yahoo prior to the acquisition by Verizon Media. Ben has since published the popular book, Badass IT Support. And 2 years back, he started QSTAC, a platform to help companies measure employee experiences based on his years of research in and around the help desk. Ben's also a perennial top 25 IT thought leader, as recognized by his peers at the Help Desk Institute. And without further ado, it really is my pleasure to welcome my friend Ben Brennan to the podcast. Ben, welcome. Let's get started by having you share a little bit more about your background and how you got into this space.
All right, let's do it. Like I was telling you before we started rolling, I'm really stoked to be here. So thank you. I from a young boy, I had always dreamed of being an IT leader. I'm just kidding. It's like, I didn't know what IT stood for until I was 29. And when I tried to Google it, it was like you Google IT and that Stephen King It book comes up. So I was a late bloomer for that. And actually, my first career was in psychotherapy. So instead of computer science, I have 2 psychology degrees. Like, instead of building computers when I was a kid, I was inventing new ways to live better and reading Balzac and Tolstoy and just being some weird kid. I grew up in Texas, very strange path. But after the psychotherapy thing happened, I wanted to explore more. So I lived in Europe. I lived in Guatemala for a year and traveled around Central America playing guitar. Came back to Berkeley, met a girl. I learned that in the US, you needed money to kind of live and have relationships and stuff. So I got a job in IT. And I thought it was just a 6-month gig, and it turned into a career. So that was cool. I was in the Bay Area. So do you know Pivotal Labs?
Of course.
So that was my first job. So I thought that everyone was as smart as the coders at Pivotal Labs. And so I was like, oh yeah, this is awesome. And they had really high standards. They were modern. So it was I just kind of made up what IT was. I would go around, ask everyone hey, what needs to get fixed? Go home and Google how to fix it, because I didn't know anything about IT. Come back and fix it. And, I kind of learned on the job, and then got recruited by Jawbone. And then when I went to Jawbone, they got a huge Sequoia round, quintupled in size. Next thing I'm the global IT manager for Jawbone. Again, very little. I was a social scientist. So it was a new experience, but everyone kept on saying this is the best IT experience we've ever had, which I thought was BS, because it really should not have been, but it's actually, it had gotten to the point where IT, had nailed all the other stuff, all the traditional stuff that we'd been working on, but had yet to kind of master the experience. And I think just bringing this humanistic, really ignorance of ITIL and how, I think it's just ignorance, pure and simple. I didn't know how IT was supposed to be. So I asked the business. I was like, the CEO there was Haas. And I was like, hey, Haas, what do you want from IT? We want this, this, this. Dope. I'm on it. Say I got recruited at Twitter. Same thing. I was like the third IT employee there. I was like, hey, what do you guys want? Go around and ask all the EAs, like, what do you want? Dick Costello, like, still occasionally will entertain, like, and help me with my startup, because it was like just a cool community of, like, I was a part of the business, and then as I got to bigger companies like Box and Yahoo and Verizon, I learned that that's not always the case. And so I invented the QSTAC tool to kind of help measure experience, and it got me a house and a career, and here we are.
So Ben, you got to listen to the episode with Matt K. Parker, who wrote the book, The Radical Enterprise, about his experience at Pivotal.
Oh, no way. That's
yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. I may have known him. Like, yeah, it's hard to remember because it was obviously a lot of dudes that all looked the same, but I will say, like, they were even, I think at the time they were building the first version of Twitter. Like, it was, and I think Dorsey just poached a bunch of those guys. So I actually saw people from Pivotal in the engineering department at Twitter, like, years later. But
amazing culture.
Yeah. It's like talk about being the dumbest person in the room. Like, you go to the stand-ups and I'm just this IT guy, long Jesus hair, like fresh off the boat from Guatemala. And these guys are like, there's the guy that, like, I think helped invent, like, the banner ad and all these, like, old school, like, extreme programming, pair programming guys. And so I think that really, the bar was set high. So, like, if I could wow those people, I could wow, the lesser expectation folks.
Do you ever get to go to the Pivotal office in the Merchandise Mart in Chicago?
No, I haven't. I left them long ago, like when they were on Market Street and Second, I think. And it was 50 developers on 25 iMacs because they did peer programming. And then Rob and Susie, or whoever the founders were, they were, like, pretty much fresh out of the garage. And, my friend was the IT manager there. And I just, he kind of fudged my resume a little bit and I got in. And but it was I didn't realize how smart everyone was until I went to work at other places. I'm like, whoa, those dudes were on it.
Well, Matt was one of the early guys. You get a kick out of meeting him. We'll have to make that happen.
Yeah, let's do it.
So you and I met when you were at Yahoo/Verizon Media, and it was certainly a unique culture. I know it had certainly an influence on you. What did you learn working in IT there? And maybe equally important, what if you had to unlearn starting your own company?
Wow. I mean, I learned a lot from every company, mainly because I had zero knowledge to begin with. So it was always learning. But I think what I learned at Yahoo was the power of, like, insight to change behavior. Because from psychotherapy, I knew how to change individual behavior. But at Yahoo, I was leading a team of, like, 100 plus, people. And, like, we were supporting, like, 15,000 employees worldwide. It was a 20-year-old search engine that used to be super cool, but it kind of faded. It wasn't necessarily Google kind of left them in the dust. And so it was this interesting culture. And you had all these awesome people in IT that were really smart and came to work wanting to do a great job. But we'll just say that the experience that the employees had was the opposite, without getting too expletive about that. What I realized was, like, they came to work wanting to do a good job. They were just really good at the wrong things. And when we rolled QSTAC out and, gave the employees a voice, essentially, about, like, here's anonymously what we really think and what we would really like, it just transformed the culture. Like, IT has a bad rap. Like, IT sometimes is seen as underperforming or not as innovative. IT is full with really smart, badass people. And if you give them the right data and you tell them what to do, they'll execute the hell out of it. And so it just let me know. I had used QSTAC at Box first, but it was like 1,000 people. It wasn't a big deal, like pre-IPO. At Yahoo is when I was like, oh, this scales, and actually, like, helps CIOs too, right? Because the CIO at Yahoo, after a couple of quarters, he made, like, the QSTAC experience score, like, the top level OKR for his boss, and held, much to my manager's chagrin, because it means we had to increase it, every quarter. But IT people are smart and competitive. If you incentivize the right behavior and give them the right metrics, they'll smash it. And it just kind of let me know that anything was possible. It gave me a lot of confidence.
So to help us understand a little bit more about the QSTAC methodology, talk us through a typical customer, how they use it, and what benefits they've achieved from it.
So our typical customers are like, they kind of skew towards a little more innovative, risk taking. IT leaders, I don't know, in your experience, you know a lot more than me. In my experience, there's a lot of analysis paralysis. There's not a lot of bias towards action. We like to think about it, talk about it, and then 2 years later happened and nothing's really happened. Whereas like, I think our customers tend to be like, yeah, let's take a swing. And they're all over the place. And we've got like everything from home builders, auction companies, tech companies, nonprofits, whatever. I think I'll tell you a story of my favorite. You don't have a favorite customer, right? But like one of my favorite stories was the most skeptical one we had, which is it was like an auction company. They're in upstate New York. It was where they're headquartered. They're global, but I went down there to Buffalo and had a beer with this guy, and he's former Apple, and he's all in on NPS. He's like, we only measure NPS. CSAT's stupid, and there's no way that you invented something better than NPS, which I didn't. It's just different, right? But and he was I was telling him about QSTAC, and he was just shaking his head. We were having wings and beers. That turned into Jameson, and we just had this argument, like kind of knocked down, dragged out about it. And I was like, much to my investor chagrin, I was just like, you know what, like just for free, just try it, no cost, just no contract, just try it one time. And he tried it, and he was like, dude, after 10 minutes of this data, I know my employees better than I did after 3 years of working here. And he not only did he, convert, and obviously they're a paying customer now, but they've helped us innovate. So they took it a step further that I didn't even envision. Like, yes, their scores have gone up, but now they use it for hiring. Like they actually, rather than hiring on like, usually when you hire, you're like, where's the job description that we used last year? Let's just do it. They do their hiring criteria based on the QSTAC score. Oh, communication in EMEA is struggling. Let's hire someone that's super communicative. Oh, in our West Coast offices, approachability is low this quarter. Let's really focus on hiring someone that's really personal. And I never would have thought of that. And hiring is like the biggest wild card in the world. So I think most of our cool features recently have come from our customers. They send out a survey. It's a little 30-second mini pulse. It's not a survey like you're thinking. It's actually highly researched and cool. It's completely anonymous, not attached to anything, super simple. Like, doesn't ask about like IT stuff. It asks in human language about quality, speed, approachability, communication. And it measures not the speed, but it measures the perception of speed. Not communication, but how your communication is perceived. And that little flip kind of empowers IT leaders to think of stuff that I never would have thought of. So like all of our features, they do not come from me, I guarantee you. Like all the cool things that you see in QSTAC, they come from our customers, that we save them time by giving them this, and then they use that time for free product development. So it's awesome.
So you and I grew up in IT at a time when the customer feedback process was almost a compliance task. You'd send out, you'd sample a percentage of your employees after they'd submit tickets and ask them for their feedback, and you get usually 3 to 5% response rate. And the most progressive organizations, this goes back 20 plus years ago, but the most progressive organizations would have some workflow where anything that was highly critical would trigger a call from the manager. How have we evolved since then, and what are we going to be talking about in terms of innovation in the space in 10 years?
Well, first of all, like I always want to make sure that I caveat that I don't think it's IT leaders' fault. Like, I just think they haven't been given the tools to work with, right? Because when you get to IT, they're like, okay, what's your benchmark for customer satisfaction? So you do a CSAT score, even though we know, and like one of my advisors has 30 years experience in benchmarking and shown me these studies. It does not, your CSAT score does not correlate, like scientifically, does not correlate with the actual satisfaction increase. Like if your CSAT score goes up and you go talk to humans at that org, you're not going to see a direct correlation, or not a strong one. And and I know I make that face too, right? But it's the right thing is often counterintuitive, And so for instance, like QSTAC is completely non-consensus. Like, for me, intuitively, my vision was like, oh, this should be continuous feedback. It should be coming in every day. No, the huge transformations happen when we do the QSTAC score and we pull everyone once a quarter, take that week to really build a great strategy, and then execute, and then pull it again. because while it sounds good intuitively, counterintuitively in practice, if you're collecting after ticket surveys, name one executive or IT manager that has time to thoughtfully go through all of that data every week. You're going to give 3 hours to that every week for your IT managers? No one does it. And so it goes into a black hole, and then trust is eroded over time. And again, I didn't make this up. This is just what I had the advantage. HDI actually helped a lot with their white papers. If you research it, you're like, oh. And I was a social scientist for, a decade. So like I understand survey science and self-report data. So I think I just came with a different point of view. And so we do it completely anonymous, and again, like a lot of our customers at the beginning are like, intuitively, you want to know who said what so you can change. But, if your waiter is sitting over you when you write the tip, you might not get an accurate reflection of how well he or she did, like it's the anonymity is key. We do it platform agnostic. Like one of our, we have a competitor that's like a huge $1 billion company for IT experience, and they measure like every login, and they log into all your systems. We don't access any systems, no PII. Like I come from like a security background too, so simple is better for me, and just completely anonymous. And when you do that, you get this shockingly candid feedback that gives you insights that will keep you busy for the entire quarter. It's just, I think social science is highly helpful, I have found, in IT. Like our mutual friend Dion, his idea was like hire an anthropologist. He's like, IT team should have an anthropologist, and like, I haven't seen one. I haven't seen a job description for that on LinkedIn recently, but if you did it, I bet you'd have really cool results. And I think, over time, as I think more people go to therapy, more people, learn about human behavior and stuff, I think you'll see a lot more social science, quote unquote, soft science in IT. And I think not surprisingly, the human aspect of IT will improve.
One of my favorite CIOs is a guy named Mark Settle, who was on this podcast last year, 7-time CIO, best-selling author, multiple books about IT. And he's most recently the CIO at Okta. And he talks passionately about how the best IT organizations aren't in the business of technology. They're really in the business of delivering better employee experiences, because delivering better employee experiences is the best way to deliver better business outcomes or better end customer experiences.
Yeah.
How do you think about using the QSTAC methodology to translate the feedback from employees into better business outcomes?
Again, I have the unfair advantage of, I have an advanced degree in like a field that codifies behavior and has spent a lot of time. So I understand going into it that self-report data, which is what that feedback is the worst, least reliable kind of data possible. And so because of that, you have to take a hyper scientific approach to it and be really sharp and tight on it to make that data good, right? And so I think just having that knowledge saved me from a lot of rookie mistakes. And we just researched the hell out of it, and we really said like, what's the actionable? I think there was an HBR article that was really good about, data isn't worth anything unless it leads to insights, which leads to action, which you can test and shows that it actually improved, right? Otherwise, you shouldn't be collecting that data, And so, we have a rule. We never ask for anything we're not going to take action on. Look at your, no offense to HR, but your employee engagement pulses, and there's like 7 minutes to take out. It's all required. Are you going to take action on all 97 of those items? If not, maybe trim it down to 30. QSTAC started as my research came up with the 30 qualities that were valued in enterprise IT. And I did ANOVA, analysis of variance, kind of saw which ones overlapped and chopped it down and chopped it out again. And then I got to, before it was an enterprise product, I was using it at companies. So I could talk to employees and kind of iterate over time. And that's how we got down to the 5 categories that we measure. So 30 seconds of employee time. And, if you do it right, you can get enough actionable data to transform, the experience. And then you check it again next quarter. And then maybe you transform the experience. Maybe you didn't execute well, and you can course correct, but like, I think if we just forget a lot of what we know about IT and just, go to other industries that have already perfected this. Like think about customer success. Customer success didn't used to exist, and now it does. And it made things a lot better, Like I think of IT as employee success. don't think if you come to work thinking about IT, you're going to do IT shit. If you come to work thinking about like I did with Haas at Jawbone, I didn't know any better because I was ignorant. So I was like, hey, what do you want from IT? And then I did that. And it turns out crowd pleaser, but it's just because I was ignorant. Those that are cursed with knowledge and experience kind of have to unlearn that. And that's a little bit harder. So I don't blame them.
Seems so obvious when you say it, and yet that's a huge opportunity for innovation in IT.
It took me like a few years to figure it out. I mean, I didn't know it right away either,
So a couple of weeks ago, you and I are co-presenting at an HTI lightning talk event. And the topic is the employee experience. And your talk was all about design thinking, which really inspired me. I hadn't thought about how the principles of design thinking, which I know back from the days when I got to know David Kelly at IDEO. And I'd love to hear you share with the guests the connection between design thinking and the evolution of QSTAC.
So I was a little bit of a late bloomer to design thinking, and it was in the Yahoo days. And I think I mentioned this to you, and I've noticed like actually two people from your podcast were at this leadership retreat at Yahoo it was Tim Crawford and Dion, which is like and another guy, like a pretty badass, like little offsite for like 10 people in the CIO staff. Right. So we were talking about a lot of really innovative stuff. And then Dion, of course, did like 90 slides and he did one on design thinking. And my mind just exploded. And I think everyone else was like, kind of, okay, yeah, whatever. And I was like, oh my God. And I was like asking him afterwards. And I ended up, MIT has like the Sloan School has an online course you can take for design thinking. And I took that course and I built QSTAC with that too. It's like, it's human-centered design. And from what I understand, it's like what just about any great experience that you've had at a hotel or an airport or anywhere else, use design thinking to get there. And it's fascinating. I mean, you know a lot more about it than me, but it's this simple, iterative process of like, rather than just coming up with ideas and then going for it, I think the steps are right. Like you empathize. So like, first of all, you actually listen and try to understand the point of view of the business. If we just did that in IT and no other steps, your experience would go up, right? To actually really understand their experience. Like we have studies, like I think Vance and Borden did an awesome study that showed the disparity between how CIOs think they're doing and how the business thinks they're doing. So look that up if you want to, question, if you want to go Andy Grove style and be paranoid. Do that. And then you define the problem, but you define the problems in context of that new understanding. So when you define the problem, even, you're doing that in the context of their POV. Then you come up with ideas. But you notice like you're only coming up with ideas now that you've defined the problem from there. And, then you prototype and test. And the way that I described it to IT people, because usually I'm sure everyone on this podcast is spaced out by now because people a lot of times aren't as excited about design thinking as you or I. Like, in IT, we built, tools for us. And then, we switched to, business centric. And so then we started building tools and experiences for, the business. But what design thinking does is not build the tools for the business. It helps you build the tools with the business. So your end users or the people that are going to be using the tool are involved in the whole process. Then they get buy-in. And then not surprisingly, it's not IT just throwing a video conferencing solution at the business. It's like collaboratively creating an awesome one. And then IT gets praised. It's kind of a hack into like adoption for tools. So I highly recommend it for everyone.
So far, we're talking about the customer experience, the employee experience, things that are innately human skills, design thinking, human-centered design. And here we are on a podcast called AI and the Future of Work. So talk me through how can technology be applied, including AI, machine learning, to improve the employee experience in a way that doesn't introduce creepy bots or, conjure these silly notions of Skynet and that sort of thing. Where do you see those two worlds colliding?
Well, you don't have to reinvent the wheel. I think if we just borrow from the private or the sector of like just consumer technology, right? Like, in IT, we kind of have a monopoly. So like if I create like QSTAC, I now sell a product, right? If people hate it, then they don't buy it. Then I run out of money and I go out of business, right? But CIOs, and don't get me wrong, I'm being tough on them, but it's one of the hardest, it's probably the hardest C-suite job ever. And it's like, CIOs are amazing people, but in enterprise IT, and especially like ITSM, we have a monopoly, right? It would be really awesome for a lot of employees to like, hey, listen, so if you want to call IT, there are two phones. There's team A and team B, but you don't have that. So we're kind of like the taxi company in a sense. Like, did you live in San Francisco ever? In San Francisco, before Uber, like I lived in the Mission, and let's say I went to a party in Potrero Hill or the Sunset. I would call Luxor Cab, and they would say, we'll be there in 45 minutes. And you call back in an hour, they're like 45 minutes. And you call back in an hour, and they're like, oh, actually that guy like clocked out. And then so I say you, it's really me re-traumatizing myself. I wasn't a very rich man at the time, walking home from Potrero Hill or the Outer Sunset, or taking the 400 bus, if you know that one, back to Berkeley, if you live in the East Bay. And, taxi cabs had decades, and they had the medallions and they had the lockdown, decades to iterate on and hold themselves to a high standard, right? I don't know if he might listen to this, but do you know Michael Deering from Harrison Metal?
I've heard the name. I don't know.
He would be an amazing guest on this podcast, but he talks about personal exceptionalism. And I love that concept of like, are you special as an IT department? Do you hold yourself to this higher standard? And because I didn't know what the standard was for IT, when I went to Pivotal and Jawbone, I was like, this is amazing. You get free snacks at work. There are ping pong tables. Like, I'm going to do a great job. Like it didn't occur to me to do mediocre IT. So I was like, we're going to wow everyone. And we held ourselves to that highest standard. Taxi cabs didn't. And, it was really annoying. They focused on internal metrics. I don't want to draw too close of a line to IT, but it's kind of similar. And then all of a sudden Uber came along. And since that day, I never took a cab in SF. And all those medallions went to shit, and the whole industry tanked, right? So listen, you work in technology. Technology moves fast. At some point, someone's going to come up with something that's going to do IT really well. Are you going to be able to be so evolved and have this exceptional experience where anyone's like, I don't want another app. IT is great. Or are people going to be like, oh my God, sign me up, how much ever it costs? Like, we're happy to get rid of IT. That's what's going to happen, if you don't hold yourself to a higher standard. And so when I'm talking to IT leaders, like what we do in QSTAC, like, we have benchmarks, but we always had the same benchmark for world class. It killed me when I started at, I think Box was the first time where I saw a mission statement and it was like, we're going to provide a world-class experience. And I was like, awesome. That sounds cool. What does that mean? Crickets. Maybe somebody will see, oh, well, a white glove experience. Okay, cool. How do you measure that? How do you define that? Nothing. So, not surprising, not a lot of, like, if you don't even define it, you won't even know if you happen to stumble on world class. So we set it up like a super high bar, and every graph that we show, we always show that world class level. And we've only had a few customers get there. Like I've had a few teams of mine get there. It took 2 years at Yahoo to get there. And then we got acquired, and another 2 years to get Verizon Media there. If you hold yourselves to a super high standard, first of all, what we learned, it's cheaper because you're actually working on the right stuff, so you can work a lot more efficiently. It's like the tail that wags the dog. All of your other metrics go good. And that's what matters, right? Let me tell you, if you're a CIO and everyone at the company thinks you're the best, congratulations, you're the best. I don't care what your first contact resolution is. If you hold yourself to that bar, not only will you not get taxi cabbed when the next Uber comes around, it's fun. Like, it's fun being awesome at something. Like that day after 2 years at Yahoo, this transformation, when I got to tell everyone at the all hands, at the global all hands, guys, we finally did it. I pulled up, guys, I probably said guys, I'm working on the gendered thing. It's so terrible. Leave that in. I'm really working on it. But I'm like, folks, I pull up the graph, and I hit the button and it shows us finally crossing that line, which is like the equivalent of like an 85 NPS score. And like everyone that day got to go home and tell their significant other, their dog or whatever, baby, for one day, I am literally the best in the world at something. And that's a good feeling. And I think a lot of people, if you don't give your team that, it's just closing tickets for 20 years and retiring,
So Ben, I got to get you off the hot seat. It feels like we're just getting started. But like you said, this one should go 2 hours. But you got to answer one last question for me.
Sure.
So here's kind of a thought experiment. So IT is all about addressing employee issues with technology when they encounter issues with technology.
Right. As
the technology improves, might there ever be a time when something like QSTAC is obsolete because technology self-heals and the technology is smart enough to resolve the issue before there's any disruption that requires a trouble ticket?
I hope so. Like we're doing it wrong. If not, we already have the next thing for the people who reach world class on the QSTAC. Like my company, we're already planning that. Like we have the average increase for QSTAC customers is like 16 points, and it's like on an NPS score, 16 points a year. So I don't know if that was a fluke in 2021, but if that continues, we're going to have a lot of really good companies that there's going to be diminishing returns for QSTAC, right? So my whole experiment, actually, like my philosophy back in the day was getting to this badass, amazing, seamless IT experience is just the beginning. Let's just get there and then we can do innovative stuff. How cool will it be if like we automate everything? There's no like password resets or, finding out like where, who's open or whatever. Like we automate all the manual tasks. And congratulations. Hey, IT people, all you that used to do a boring manual job, now you get to be data scientists, and IT is now data as a service, and you can go to IT and run reports and on anything and like empower, like you could do such cool stuff, and I 100% think QSTAC, I hope QSTAC is unneeded. I was a little skeptical about it until COVID, and after COVID, I mean, MSPs are reaching out. We just closed an MSP the other day, and like they're into experience now, like everyone's getting into it. And I'm like, man, maybe we turned a corner. I don't know. But yeah, I hope I'm CEO of, whatever the next company is. And yeah, I hope we work ourselves out of a job. You too, at your company,
There, we brought it full circle. I love the vision. Obviously, we share that vision. Ben, when that comes to fruition, I hope you'll come back and we'll have that discussion.
Totally. If you want, after we stop hitting record, I'll tell you what the next ones are. They're pretty cool.
Absolutely. All right. Good. That's a cool tease for the next episode. Good. Well, Ben, that's all the time we have. Before I let you go, though, how can our listeners learn more about you, your research, QSTAC? What's next?
Definitely connect with me on LinkedIn. It's like LinkedIn/IN/Ben Brennan. I'm terrible at Twitter, but I probably should start doing it because I have a cool Twitter handle like @WHY. Maybe I'll open it up. So come follow me on that, and no promises. But ultimately, like, go to QSTAC.com, QSTAC.com. Yeah, sign up for a demo and come meet us and find out what we're doing, and it might be a good fit. You never know. If you care about experience, could be a fun thing, or if nothing else, you'll get inspired to try something else. But I think that we have to keep swinging and keep moving, and we have to have a bias towards action. So like, the amount of times we've been talking about doing that for a couple of years. Do it. Try new stuff. Break stuff. It's fine. Like nothing's worse than being mediocre at something. So like my unsolicited advice, you didn't even ask this. My unsolicited advice is take a swing, see the world differently. Like Steve Jobs, along with like a disproportionate number of Fortune 100 CEOs since the 80s, I'm not recommended this, but all did acid before they had this great success. So whether it's an ayahuasca retreat or just beers with Dan and Dion and Tim Crawford, or whatever can inspire you, learn about it, and then don't come back from the conference and forget about it. Put it into practice. Like IT could be really fun, and I just want that for everyone. So that's my 2 cents, and I'll shut up. This has been really fun, Dan. Thank you so much, man.
Ben, brilliant. This has been a lot of fun. I look forward to the next one. Time flew by, but that's all the time we have for this week. I'm your host, Dan Turchin of AI and the Future of Work. We're back next week with another fascinating guest.